Hey there all you minties, this is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, and join me today for an advanced look at the Marvel Classics Omnibus from Marvel Comics, so please stay tuned. And welcome back everybody. Now before I get started, a huge thank you to David Gabriel and the folks at Marvel for sending us an advanced copy of this omnibus. This omnibus is due out in the direct market on September 30th. Let's take a look at the spine here, for all you spine watchers. And of course, the back. I really like this up here. A whole library in one omnibus. So, we'll talk a little bit about what it is and what the contents are as I look in the book, but I wanted you all to see the back. So here are all the covers of what's contained in here. And down here at the bottom, collecting Marvel Classics 13 through 36, the book retails for $150. One of the things I've been asked to show, because I don't do this very often, are the French flaps here in the books. So this one here, on this side, collects all the classic stories that are found in here. And then in the back, I believe that's what the term is, French flap, this has all the creators that help make this book. All the comic book writers, and I think, yeah, that's all it is, none of the artists. So let's take a look at it under that dust jacket. By the way, that was the first image I saw of the Marvel Classics comics was this, and I really liked it. And I bet it's because it's John Buscema with Ernie Chan on inks. Here's what it looks like underneath that dust jacket. That is She, one of the stories I read in here. So let's go ahead and get this open and talk just a little bit about what these stories are, because I myself was not familiar with these comics. But here are all the writers and artists who adapted the works, and then the original writers whose work were adapted in here. The table of contents where you'll find each of the books. So there are 24 issues collected in here, right? And the book has over 1,200 pages. And that's mainly because, as you notice, each of these stories in here is about 52 pages long. No ads. So these Marvel Classic Comics ran from 1976 all the way to 1978. And they adapted just classic literary works. So the first one we kick off is The Last of the Mohicans. And each one is like this. All the credit is up here. Like the script is Doug Minch. The artist is Sonny Trinidad. And then about the author. So for example, this right here, Last of the Mohicans, was originally written by James Fenimore Cooper. And so it tells you about his life here. And then you get the comic book adaptation of Last of the Mohicans. And all of them, I think with the exception of the last comic, are 52 pages. With the exception of the Christmas Carol. I'm almost 100% sure that one is just a little bit shorter. But this is the kind of things to expect in here. It's just a retelling of these classic books. Anywhere from the Iliad, which you saw on the cover, to War of the Worlds, to, of course, Last of the Mohicans, White Fang. It's the other one that I read. So I read a couple. I read 3 books just to give myself familiar with the work in here. And I read She, because I had never read the original She. I read White Fang, because that was one of the books that I was a big fan of growing up as a kid. And then Frankenstein, just to see what the adaptations look like now. I'm not going to flip through every page, but just kind of give you an idea of what to expect. Now, the ending of each of the comics has a pin-up. I love this. This is so cool. Of the actual creator and their creation. Most of these are drawn by Howard Chaykin, Mary Seravin, and Paul Gulacy. In the back, there's usually ads for the upcoming books, and then you get issue 14. So you're probably asking, why does this contain issues 13 through 36 of the Marvel Classics comics? Well, 36 was the finale. That was the final issue. That's where the series ended. And this was written by Chris Claremont, by the way. I should have read this one, but I had to go with the ones I'm familiar with, and then one story that I was not familiar with at all. And the first 12 issues were just reprints of the classic illustrated comics, which were originally printed in black and white by the Pendulum Press. So Marvel took them and recolored them and put a new cover on them. That's why those are not reprinted in here. And I think some of them are just the same stories. Like I think Frankenstein was one of them, if I'm not mistaken. So each one of the stories, or most of them, sorry, or at least the ones I read, are split up by chapters. Kind of like the actual novels. Let's keep going in here. Again, you have this awesome pin up in the back. I can imagine kids ripping that off and hanging them up on the wall, and their moms walking into the room. What is that mess? Mom, that is Robert Louis Stevenson. You can't say nothing about me hanging that up in my room. Anyway, here's Ivanhoe. This is another one that I almost read that I'm not familiar with, mainly because I think this is written by Bill Mantlo. So you have people like Bill Mantlo, Chris Claremont, and Doug Mensch that were the retellers, I guess, of the original stories. They were the script writers. And some of these adaptations are A Christmas Carol. That's the last one. You have Alice in Wonderland, Count of Monte Cristo, The First Man in the Moon, Frankenstein, of course, Last of the Mohicans, the Iliad, and the Odyssey, both of those by Homer. Ivanhoe, which you saw, The Moonstone, The Prince and the Pauper, and Robinson Crusoe, She, A History of Adventure, and White Fang. Those are just to name a few of the 24 classic stories collected in here. So, one of the things I was going to say is I wish I had known these as a kid, because here's the other book that I read, because when I had to do book reports, these comics would have come in handy. So here's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, a little blurb about Mary Shelley. This one here is written by the editor at the time, John Warner, and then the artist is Dino Castrillo. I noticed there were a lot of Filipino artists doing this, and I became familiar with those artists like The Tribe. The Tribe actually pencils one of these stories here. That because of their work in Conan, their work in the Marvel Horror Lives Again Omnibus, and The Tribe, of course, is just 4 or 5 Filipino artists that either drew or inked, and that's who the credit went to. And as I mentioned in the past, it reminded me of Clamp. But this is the story of Frankenstein. It's the classic story, but I really like his take on Frankenstein, the way it looks. And then you get a pin-up of Mary Shelley. I would have hung that up on my wall. Master of the World. Well, let's flip through here. Let's look at She really quick, because I had never read the original story. And the original story was written by Henry Rider Haggard. He's the guy that did the King Solomon's Mines, I think. This one's written by John Warner, and Dino Castrillo and Rod Santiago are the artists. But I wanted to see what it was like to read this for the first time without having to read the original novel. And this story is pretty cool. It follows the journey of Horace Hawley and Leo Vinci as they go to Africa and they discover this lost kingdom. So, I mean, it's a story we've heard before, but I think this is kind of where it originated from. And there's this lost kingdom, and they have this white queen known as She. She who must be obeyed, or there will be consequences. But I'm glad I read this, because I think this is the story that has been emulated many times over and over by different writers. Not just comic book writers. Then, of course, I had to read White Fang again. As 6th, 7th, and 8th grade year, I don't know how many times I read this and Hatchet. This is Doug Mensch writing it, and the Philippine Tribe. I guess this is before they were known as the Tribe. But it is Jack London's masterpiece, as a matter of fact. Here's a little bit about the author. And as I mentioned, I don't know how many times I must have read this. And this, maybe it's because it's about a boy and his dog, or a sense of adventure, but it still breaks my heart to read it. Every time, no matter if it's a movie adaptation or for the first time ever reading a comic adaptation. And of course, yes, this amazing Jack London picture. But it's more White Fang, less Jack London. Now, this particular omnibus has 1,264 pages. Normally, I'm really, really cautious as to flipping through here, and I still edited out some things, even though these are classic stories. I don't know how much spoilers I can reveal for a story that's been written 200 years ago. There's Robin Hood. And let's look in the back here for some extras. As I mentioned, it ended in issue 36 with The Christmas Carol. And all of them up until, I think, issue 36 were 52 pages. And this one is just shy of a few pages of being 52. So you have page art from issue 15. Wow. Look at that. That is gorgeous. You have original pages. The cover right here by John Buscema and Ernie Chan, as I was talking about, without the colors. That's so awesome. And the Iliad is such an epic story. How can you make it more epic? As I was reading these 3 stories from in here, and I'll probably read more later on after this overview, I thought to myself, the task that it must have taken for these comic book writers and artists to just put these classic works into 52 pages. That's almost an impossible task. But they were able to do it, and there you go. There's the Iliad with the new colors. Now let's look at this binding. 1,264 pages, sewn binding. You probably saw how well it laid over. Here's that eye that you're looking for. As far as the paper quality, it is this glossy paper that has been a custom for Marvel to use over the last couple of years. And you probably saw no gutter loss. Not that you need much of a gutter there to begin with, because there are really no splash pages. There's a couple, but I mean, the book lays over really nice. We're looking at the last page of the omnibus, and it's still laying over without trying to close in on you. And even in the front, towards the very beginning, this is the first page with the table of contents, it's laying over nice. So there is minimal gutter loss because of that eye and the sewn binding. And that, as they say, is that. And that was the page count, the content, and the build of this omnibus. Let me know in those comments down below if you're picking it up, if you've never heard of these comics, if you've been looking forward to these books being reprinted and were a part of your childhood. And if you've read these, which are your favorite adaptations? Again, this was the Uncanny Omar. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button if you haven't subscribed yet. We put out videos every day. And more importantly, please everybody stay healthy, stay safe, and much love to all of you.